Visit us at Eduvvo. Thank you for calling Eduvvo.
Hey guys, welcome back. In this video, we will be looking at string manipulations with PHP. Now, as usual, the first thing we do is to create a link in our index page that will speak to our string manipulation. So I'm just going to duplicate that and I'm just call it stringmanip.php and just rename all this text. Now that I have the link up, I need to create the page that this will navigate to. So I go over and create a new document, call it stringmanip.php. And then I go ahead and bring up my HTML5 boilerplate. So after doing all of that and changing my title, let's get straight into the fun. So firstly, we're doing PHP, so we have to use our PHP tags. And then I'm going to declare two variables here. And remember that to declare a variable, we just need a $sign and then we give it a name. So we say phrase1 is going to be equal to, and I want it to be a string. And this time I'm going to use double quotation marks. And I'm going to say, let's say student who came late. All right. And then I'm going to declare another variable and I'm going to call it phrase2. And then this one is going to say in class, comma, stand with rock. All right, two random sentences. They don't really mean anything. But essentially, by now, we should know how to declare variables and assign values to them. And we know how to echo variables to our screen. So if I wanted to print out what is being expressed by these phrases, I can just say echo phrase 1. All right. And then that would actually just print that statement here, phrase 1 to the screen. And likewise, I can echo phrase 2. All right. So the end result of my echoing these two statements is that they are printed line by line, right? Students who came in, well, who came late. And then you notice late and in are kind of joined because there's no space, because the strings were kind of, well, I didn't put a space in either one. I should have either put a space here or a space here for the echo statements to do that. But you notice once again that they printed out in one line, and we already ventilated that it's best to print the tag that they should be printed in. But today we just want to look at string manipulation. So I'll just keep it rather simple for now. All right. So the first thing I want to bring across is a thing called concatenation, which is actually the joining of two strings. So let's say I wanted to join them together, but we just did that, right? We just joined them and you see that they are there, but then there is no space here. And what if we wanted to inject something else in between the text that is already in the two variables? So concatenation actually allows us to put blocks of string together, whether it's a string variable or it is a static string, meaning I am declaring, just opening quotation marks and typing strings. If I want to put them together, we call that concatenation. And in PHP, we use a full stop to concatenate. So if I say echo phrase1 dot and then phrase 2, then I get the same net effect when I refresh. I just changed the code and I'm just refreshing the page and you see that it's the same text. All right. But then if I need a space, I'm not going to modify these two. I don't know if these two should or should not have a space. I'm not going to put one there, but I know I want it printed with a space in between. So what I'm going to do is say dot, and then I'm going to open quotation marks and then put in my own static string, which in this case can be a space, and then I use another dot. So each time I use a dot, I'm actually joining a string to another string. So in other words, I'm joining the string that is in phrase 1, which is student who came in late, and then I'm joining that onto a string that I only put a space in, and then I'm joining all of this further onto another bit of string called, which is found in phrase 2. So when I refresh this, I will see it printed with that space. All right. So by extension, if I wanted to add more to that sentence, student who came late, and then what if I wanted to specify, and then I said maybe comma, and then I said named, then I said named Tiffany, comma. All right. So what this is going to do is say join on phrase 1, which is student who came late, and then join on the comma named Tiffany, and then comma. So everything inside of the static string will be joined onto this, to the right of this, and to the left of this. So when I refresh that sentence, then it should include all of that, right? And then you notice I don't have a space here, so I can just go back and edit that string and say comma space Tiffany, all right? And then when I refresh, everything looks like at least a fairly properly formed statement. All right. Of course, grammatically it may be incorrect, but at the end of the day, I just want us to appreciate how we can go about doing what we call concatenation. Now, moving on, another cool feature that PHP has, they expose certain built-in functions that allow us to set if we want letters to be uppercase or lowercase. All right. So I'm going to create a variable and call it name, and I'm going to put my name in there. So my name is Trevor Williams, but notice I'm writing it all in lowercase. All right. Now, if I wanted Trevor Williams to be printed with uppercase letters, at least the first letter, then I would do something like this. So here I have an echo statement. I'm just echoing the sentence uppercase first letter. So I want the first letter in this variable to have an uppercase letter, so that the first letter in this variable is T. All right. So even though it's Trevor Williams, that's the first letter in that entire variable. So if I wanted that uppercase, then I would use that function, and we can see here, well, this is not printing out as we desire. And once again, that's because, remember, the echo does not break line automatically. So what I'll do is just include an echo and put a BR tag right here so that we have that break line after this concatenation exercise. All right. So once again, let me just redo that. And there we go. So uppercase first letter, and we're uppercasing T in the variable name. All right. So just another change. I just remember that we should start off with our H1 tag at the top to indicate which page we're on. So apologies for skipping that earlier, but essentially our function for that is UC first name. And notice I'm still using a concatenation. I'm echoing a static string here. Yes, I use single quotes, so I'm just showing you that you can use single quotes or double quotes. And we said uppercase first letter. So the demonstration is that we are uppercasing. UC, I guess, means uppercase. And if you hover over it and you have the requisite extensions installed, then you'll get a bit of explanation as to what that function does. And it takes some string as its parameter. So I'm passing in name, which is a string variable, and then it is uppercasing the first letter in that string. And then I'm further concatenating a BR tag. All right. So the concatenation works with functions. As long as you're expecting a string, you can say static string concatenate onto the result of this function call, which should be a string, which would be the transformed the uppercase of the first letter of this string. That's what this function would return, which is also a string. So you concatenate that onto this sentence, and then I'm further concatenating a BR tag. All right. And then what if I wanted each word to have uppercase? All right. So I'm just going to duplicate this, and I'm going to say uppercase first letter of each word. All right. So this echo statement is going to print out, or at least I'm going to change the function that is being used here. So you have UC first and you have UC words. All right. So UC words actually uppercases each word found in the string. So that's one word. It uppercases the first letter of that word. This is another word. It uppercases that one. So if I put in phrase 1, then I would get a capital S, capital W, capital C, capital L. If I did this one, it would be capital I, capital C, etc., etc. So because I'm doing name, I expect to get a capital T and a capital W. And when I review the result of that, there's my H1 tag, and I review the result, I'm seeing Trevor Williams, all right? And I'm seeing exactly what I expect. Now, if I wanted everything to be uppercase, then I could use, and I'll just say echo uppercase, all right? And I'm going to type this one from scratch. So we're going to do some concatenation again. So I'm uppercase, and then I'm going to concatenate onto the result of the new function that we're going to be looking at, named str upper. str to upper, rather. So I'm going to say str to, and I'm getting a bit of help here from Visual Studio Code. And then the function is str to upper, and they're showing me to the right what parameters I need to pass in, which would be a string. So I can pass in a variable that has a string, as we've seen here, right? So if I pass the name, then the expectation is that everything will be uppercase. So I'm going to pass in name, and we'll just test that theory. And I'll just concatenate a BR tag at the end to make sure that we get a break line afterwards. And when I refresh this, then Trevor Williams is printed in uppercase. All right. So these are some useful little functions that are there. All right. And then in the same way that I have to upper, I have to lower. So I'm just going to duplicate this line, and I'm going to say lowercase. And then this function would be str to lower, all right? And since all of my text is already in lowercase, I'm going to show you that you can pass in a variable, or you can just write the string that you wish to enter. So I'm just going to replace the variable with an uppercase sentence. So this is all upper, or rather this was all uppercase, all right? So the expectation is that once we pass any bit of text into the function str to lower, that it will become lowercase text. All right. So once I refresh, then we see I wrote it in as all uppercase. So I'm sure you can appreciate if I echoed it like this, then it would all come out in all caps. And I passed all these capital letters into the function str to lower, which effectively converted everything into lowercase. All right, so for some further distinction between our sections, I'm going to put in some HR tags. But then remember, you can't just put in the HR tag by itself once you're inside of a PHP tag. You actually have to echo this to screen. So if I want a tag, I simply echo. So I'm just going to echo this HR tag between the concatenation section and the case transformation section. All right, and then we'll be moving on to some other little features that help us to repeat. So the first one that we'll be looking at is one that helps us to repeat a string. So I'll say echo and repeat string, and then I'm going to concatenate onto a function called str underscore repeat. Now you may be saying, oh, this may be a lot to remember, you know, you can't commit all of this to memory, and that's fine. I mean, it's years of practice that allows me to do this, so I can appreciate if it is daunting, but just remember, you can always research, you can always find resources to help you find the easiest way to accomplish what you want. But this is good knowledge regardless, because then it helps you to be a more rounded PHP developer. All right, so I'm going to print repeat string, and I'm concatenating that static text onto the result of whatever this function is going to return to me, because that's a value returning function essentially. If you haven't done functions, that's fine, but this is going to return a value, and that value is what will be printed. It will be concatenated into this statement. All right, and then I'm going to concatenate a BR tag. All right. So str repeat actually helps us to set one value, whether it's a variable, whatever it is that you want to repeat, and how many times you want to repeat it. So let's say I wanted to print name or my name 10 times. All right. Well, let's start simple. I wanted to repeat the letter A 10 times. So the first parameter in str repeat is A, or the string that you wish to repeat. All right. So when you get into functions, you start talking about parameters and values and the value types that need to be passed in. So the first one is a string. It has to be a string because this is a string manipulation function. And we pass that in by just, making reference to the value. And then we say comma and the number of times that we wish to have it multiplied. So you see, I'm getting some help here from Visual Studio Code where it's saying, okay, the first variable needed to be string, check. And then the next one needs to be an integer or a number, which would determine how many times I repeat, which means I can't put another string there or else it will break. So I'll put 10 because I want the letter A to be printed 10 times. And then if I refresh, and everything should look a bit differently with the lines, here we go. Repeat string, and we have A occurring 10 times. If I change that string to be repeated, once again, I could put in a variable. So I could put in the variable name. And there you have my name being printed 10 times across the page. And I'll extend this a bit more. What if I wanted, let's go back to the letter A. So I'm just going to undo and go back to A. What if I wanted A to be printed in all caps? I wrote it as a static common case, but I want it in all caps. Of course, we could just do that, but I mean, let's face it, that's a bit too easy. So, and not that it needs to be difficult, but I'm just trying to show you something that you could actually nest all of this inside of another function. So I could say str to upper, and then I'm passing in all of this. So let me break that down for you. I'm saying str to upper, which we looked at before, which takes a string as its parameter. And then as its parameter, I'm passing in this other function call, which returns a string. And the string it's returning is the letter A 10 times. So it's returning the common letter A 10 times. And that's going to come back as a string. And then what we're doing is calling str to upper on top of that string that is being returned. So in other words, and I really should have duplicated this, so I shouldn't have erased it. So I'm just duplicating it so that we can see them side by side, or at least, on the same screen. So str repeat is printing 10 lowercase a's. Now I'm putting those 10 lowercase a's inside of another function called str to upper, which should capitalize everything in that. So when I refresh this screen, then I get the first one, which is all lowercase a's, and then I get the next one, which is all uppercase a's. All right, so you can actually nest functions. That's what you call nesting, and combine them to get your desired result. All right, let's move on to some more fun stuff. So there is another function here called substring that allows us to get a portion of a string. All right, so I just typed that out quickly, and this is the form of the substring function. So it's really sub str. And what it does is take a string variable, a string value. So whether you stored it in a variable or you're typing in the value manually, and it says from what starting point to what ending point do you want me to extract. So in other words, Trevor Williams, between the two words, this has 7 letters and this has 8. All right. What this sub str function is saying is that start from the 5th letter. So the 5th letter here is the O, and get me up to the 10th letter. All right. No, let me retract that. It says starting at this character, get me this many characters afterwards. That's what it's really saying. All right. So in other words, start at the 5th character, which in this case would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the O is your starting point, and it really means start for 10 characters after the 5th character. All right. So 5 means give me everything after the 5th character, and then this number is as many as 10, and spaces do count, so don't think that the space is exempted. All right, so it would be 10 spaces from here. All right, so without counting that, I'll actually just run the code and we see what happens. So we'll just go over here, refresh, and there we go. So you started at the O, and that's the 5th, and then it goes on and it's getting 10 characters in the string from starting from the 5th one. So if I adjust this and I said maybe 3, I want to start from the 3rd character and get 5 characters afterwards, then that whole dynamic would change, and I'm just getting the end of my name, which is vor, and the space actually. All right, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and the space makes 5 characters. Okay, so that space, bear in mind that the space is important. All right, so I just added a bunch more functions here, and we can just go through them because I think we have the general idea. Each function does something differently, and you know, it allows you to be creative and to explore the code. So I'll just push through with all of them. So we have another one here that says get position of string, meaning you use strpos, that's the name of the function, and you pass in the string and you say what character or character sequence you'd like to find the position of in the string. Now note, strings are just like arrays, or arrays are just like strings, meaning, well, strings are just like arrays, meaning the first letter is always 0. All right, so that's why even with our substring, it would have started after the 3rd character because it's really 0, 1, 2, 3. So it's really the 3rd character by the counting like it's an array, why it would have started on the 4th one. All right, so just the same way when we get position, remember that the very first character in any string is always going to be 0. So if I said find the position of the W, and I refresh, and when I do that, you're going to see a bunch of things, but the position of the W is 8 because I have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The space counts. All right, the space does count as 7, and this would be the 8th because it started counting from 0. All right, so that is how that function works. And then for the other ones, we have one that says find character, and we just pass in the character. So we have strchr, and we pass in the string and then the character that we want inside of that string, and it will return, you know, where it is kind of vibe. It will kind of show you where it's starting from, or at least the first occurrence of that character. So it is case sensitive in this case because find character capital R didn't work because there are no capital R's inside of that string called name. All right, so adding some more functions to this, we will now look at how we find the length of a string. So the length of a string would be found by strlen, which will just return how long the string is. If you want to know how many characters, or well, how long a string is, how long a word is, how long a sentence is, how many characters are in that contiguous block of text. So when I refresh this, we'll first look at strlen, and the length of the string of my name is 16. So we're finding the length of the variable name. And that means that if it starts counting, it starts counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 characters. Now, please note that the length is how many there are. But if we're going to count as how the other functions would have been processing the string, we always start counting from 0, 1, 2, 3. So it's always going to be n minus 1. Where n is strlen, you can always run a variable. If it is that you need to run like a for loop over a string or something like that, always remember that it's the len, whatever value the strlen returns, minus 1. All right. Now back to the other function. The next one that we want to look at is the trim function. So firstly, I echoed a sentence here. Without a trim, we have the letter A, then we have another, we're concatenating that letter A onto a string with a space, B, C, D, and space again, then E. All right. And if we look at it, then we see that we have it without any trim. So without trim, we have A space B space C, and that's human readable. That's fine. All right. Then the next operation that we carry out is to actually trim the spaces on both sides. So this has no spaces in it. That's just the letter A. But then I'm going to run the trim function over this text. So what trim does is take off any spaces that might be to the left or to the right of the string. So remember, all of this is a string. It's not looking at each letter. It's just looking at where the quotation marks start and where they end. And then it's going to say, is there any space between the first character and the open quotation mark and the last character and the open quotation mark? And then if we put it inside of this trim function, it will say remove all the spaces that are there. So if we look at the output of this line here, 41, then we will see that it will have A and B joined because there's no longer any space between A and B, and D and E joined because there's no longer any space, but C remains the same because once again the trim only works on the extreme left or the extreme right. All right. Then variations to the trim are L trim and R trim. The L means left and the R means right. That's all there is to it. So the L trim just says trim all spaces to the left, and the R trim means trim all spaces to the right. So trim does on either side or both sides, and then you have functions for either side. And if we look at the output of those, then we see that for the L trim, the B has lost its space, but the D maintains its own. And then for the R trim, the B maintains its space, but the D has lost its own. So that's really the difference between those two. But once again, trim does either side regardless. And then the final one that we'll look at is the replace. So you can use str replace, and then you pass in your string that you're looking for, the string that you want to replace it with, and then you pass in that string or the variable with a string that it should find this in and replace with that. All right. So when I refresh, I note none of these are actually making changes to the actual variables. They're just allowing you to make changes on demand while maintaining the actual string. All right. So if I look at the output for that, then we see that we get in class sit with rock, where initially it was stand with rock. So we have the original thing being printed out here nonetheless, and then we have the modified one here because on demand we just wanted to say sit with rock instead of stand with rock. Well, that's it for now with our string manipulations. There's a lot more to it, but this is enough to get started and enough to get you excited. And if you have any questions, comments, or feedback, feel free to drop me a line and let me know.